In the fall of 2014, I got a job as a supervisor over 13 volunteer English teachers. I would be working in a Chinese city called Weihai, located in Shandong province. The company that hired me sends English teachers to Mexico, India, China, Russia, and Ukraine each semester. I was super super excited as the opportunity because only not only would I have the chance to live in China again, I'd originally been one of the volunteers for the same program several years prior, but my university was willing to grant me a semester worth of Chinese language credits as an academic internship. I could get good experience, live abroad in a country that I consider my second home, and complete my semester of school. It was my dream semester. And Wing Hai, the volunteers, and I lived and worked in a previous international private school. They treated us really well. One of the biggest perks being that in addition to taking the same vacation days as the school's facility that took place over China's national holidays, we also got an extra week or two of personal vacation time. It was during one of these vacations that I had one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. Two of my friends from the group, I called them Sarah and David, decided that they wanted to travel down south to China's Gang, Gangduing province during the Dragon Boat Festival. I suggested that we visit Wingshua, a little-known village surrounded on all sides of the region's gorgeous mountains. I'd visited a year before and wasn't about to pass up an opportunity to get to visit there again. Search Google images of Yangshu Sanctuary and you'll understand why I'm so crazy about this place. Yangshu isn't a large town, but even so, if you plan to do everything that you want to while you're there, you need transportation, since most of the things to do are out in the countryside. The problem was that we'd chosen a super busy time of the year to visit such a popular tourist location. All the traffic in the area, the entire 6 days we were there, was literally a continuous traffic jam. So taking cabs or hiring rickshaws wasn't an option. We were fine though, as we'd rented some bikes which gave us freedom to go anywhere we wanted. It actually worked out evenly better than relying on cabs because we wouldn't be able to get to some of the places that we went out of our way and inaccessible by car. I remembered some mud caves pretty deep in the countryside as I visited them before. It was about an hour outside of town by bike, so it was more than a little hike out of our way. But its scheduled nature was one of the reasons It was such an appealing destination, especially during such a busy holiday. It was a nice to have a break from all the tourists. I convinced Sarah and David to make the trip to these mud caves, explaining how we already done everything there is to do immediately around the city. They reluctantly agreed and moved of the fifth day we grabbed our bikes and headed out. We rode for an hour and a half, 2 hours. After 2 hour mark I realized that I must have gotten lost. Granted, it had been quite a while since I'd last been there, so it's understandable that I didn't remember the route. Regardless, I felt stupid and guilty because I had taken up the mud caves so much to my friends, and it looked like we weren't even going to make it to them. Not only that, we seemed to be in a completely isolated section of the countryside. I spoke the language, so finding our way back to town wasn't going to be a problem, provided we found another person. From what it looked like, we were in the middle of the wilderness. I was worried that I'd intentionally wanted one of the last days of our vacation. I experienced the situation to my friends who groaned and we noticeably annoyed at me, but who, to their credit, didn't compare or even blame me for ruining their vacation. They actually made me feel worse about my screw up. This was one in a lifetime experience, and I knew that losing a vacation day was no small matter to them. We stopped our bikes and began discussing what we should do. Should we continue following this current trail and maybe find some further along the way? Should we try backtrack and run into someone closer to the main road? Should we just abandon our original plan and try finding something else to do in the country? While we were deciding what course of action we should take, I noticed some odd looking buildings hidden within a valley. I was struck by that they vegetarian clinging to steep mountain slopes. I estimated there were bound to be some people in or around those buildings, and it couldn't have been more than a 15-minute ride from where we currently were. Aside from much, some of the most memorable places in China are the ones that you stumble upon by accident, the ones that aren't known as big tourist places. Our bad luck could turn out to be a good thing after all. It was an event as we rode our bikes into the enclave that it had been abandoned for some time. These buildings were obviously once part of an old government of the monastery area when communism was full swing and everyone regulated to live in commercial compounds. After Mao's death and Deng Zong, Deng Xiaoping started on economic reforms to move China away from communism. People deserted these communes to make life in the city and chase a capitalist dream. So what we stumbled upon was actually a really cool place of Chinese history. We decided to check it out, look around, take some pictures, etc., etc. The entire compound was an enormous shrine, Xing Shrang Ying, which is actually a house constructed in the wall surrounding a large courtyard that usually constructs small structures. Again, you can Google it for a better idea of what it looks like. In this case, though, it was just a household. It was an entire walled community. These walls themselves compared the living quarters. The central area controlled over an overgrown field, where they would have kept the publicly owned livestock. It looked like some animals had taken up residence since the people left. Some goats and crows grazed along grass, and chickens chucked and their feet scattered around the perimeter of the field down dotted. Which I wish at one point had all smell for textile miles of small-time individual production plants, deep in which this place speechless in. What we chucked around the life area, and it was immediately clear that this place has been abandoned for several decades. The rooms were almost completely vacant. Only furniture and a few odd assortments of position blocks, chopsticks, portraits of Mayo were left behind, creating a sort of gloomy atmosphere and checked crumbling walls. We snapped some pictures, recorded some videos, and just grimly took in the scenery. We were getting ready to leave when I heard a voice coming from far of the community. Was somebody still living here? It was possible. We had seen some animals left in the central area. After all, I assumed they were wild, but it made sense that someone was still raising them. In fact, it probably made more sense because it didn't seem very likely that these animals were find our way inside a gated community like this. They approached the apartment where a voice was coming from, the door slightly with a rich smell of license wafted out. The voice continued on, almost like a chant. David spoke up. You think this guy knows the way back to Yangzhou? You should ask for directions. I thought maybe this person inside was performing some kind of religious ceremony, so was reluctant to interrupt him. As I said much, we don't know how long we're going to take this in there. Do you seriously just want to wait outside the door for a couple hours like a bunch of creepers? Just knock on the door, and if what they think they're doing is really important, then they'll ask us to wait and give us directions when they're done. I was a bit annoyed by this because David had a tendency to use our celebrity status as white people do respect spiritual treatment from Chinese nationalists. I preferred to try to blend in with the culture as much as I could, and I have strong respect for local customs, perfectly religious ones. But he also had a point. us their willingness to help us would he even greater and would likely drop whatever they were doing the second they saw us. So I rapped lightly on the door. There was no response. I knocked a bit louder, and the person continued mumbling to themselves. I opened the door slightly and called out to them to alert them of presence. What? Ni hao? Ni hao! There, the chanting stopped for a moment, almost impertinently, but then continued as through nothing happened. I pushed the door open all the way and saw an elderly hunchbacked man wandering around the room, shaking a wooden tool. He nobly mumbled his intention. He was clearly a communist-era comrade. He hunts possession, walked, yet colored skin, told years of hard work. He was practically doubled over the wrist, only have a few wispy white hairs on the top of his head. His clothes were the classical communist fate, dark gray pants with matching button-up shirt, reaches his Adam's apple, along with a square cut off. He must have taken great care of his clothing, since they were certainly good shape from around 1950s, as not like anyone could replace an artistic clothing 60 years in fact. Even more surprisingly than his physical appearance, however, the state of apartment, given how empty the rest of the rooms were and his economies, I was shocked at how decrepit this one was. It looked as though he scavenged everything his neighbors had left behind when they left. None of the walls were accessible because tables had been pushed up against them, occupying every inch of the room, particularly flowers, bread, bracelets, and necklaces. The shoes of infants curling down carefully, placed various poses were flowers behind the necklaces. The shoes of infant drawn paper, and to gross item, and I couldn't even begin to identify. I approached him, began to speak, asking if he was familiar with Yank's shoe, and if he would be able to help us find our way back in the road. In response, he only muttered a short phrase. We'll say Sagu run? We'll say Sagu run. I'm short for people. I'm short for people. Was this person expecting company? Excuse me? I asked in Mandarin. Wo say sa jin? He repeated again urgently. He glanced at me, and his eyes darted to Sarah and David. He looked between three of us, repeating the phrase over and over. I felt bad. This poor man must have been senile. Maybe his friends or family had left the commune and provided to come back, and he was still waiting for their return. Or maybe he was just permanently forgone. Honestly, brave. He was prepared to receive 4 guests who hadn't yet arrived. I tried communicating with him a few more times, but he simply continued mumbling this cryptic phrase, shaking his wooden object in his hand. I looked closer and realized I'd seen the object he was holding before. It was a religious instrument used for branding states of Buddha, similar to how Catholics believe that barking of the exorcist perfumes members of their sins. Buddhists use tools like this one. This man was shaking to sprinkle statues of Buddha with water, symbolically clearing themselves. This was shaped like Spanish maracas and were rattled with tiny holes that allowed for shovel water to escape. People would refuse the water for the pleasant smell. I don't know what this man was mixed with the water, but it was a plenty putrid smell. I ignored it and turned back to Sarah and David. "What's he saying, Sarah asked. "He just keeps saying I'm missing 4 people, I replied. "What does that mean?" Honest, Honestly, I have no clue, but I have the feeling he's not going to be able to help us. Should we just try to head back to the main road and hopefully we run into someone who could give us directions? What the hell? David yelled. Sarah and I spun at him. That old guy just shook me, he complained, motioning to a wet spot on his shirt. I rolled my eyes. Give him a break, I said. He obviously doesn't know what he's doing. As I said this, the elderly man continued to shuffle around the room, sprinkling water to the statues of Buddha and the other artifacts laid out on the table, while wondering who sang in Gu Ran. Who sang Gu Ran? I'm fine with just going, but you should at least ask him if he has any water. My bottle is completely empty. Sarah said it was a good idea to get a refill before we left. Thanks for living. Ridiculously humid and hot year-round, so even if it was already late October, it felt like mid-July in Florida. We were so spotty that they could easily get dehydrated by standing around, even if brought out by riding bikes. Yeah, that's a good idea, I responded. I was about to turn to the man for one last attempt at communicating. He obviously found out where we could get some water. He violently shook the maraca-like tool, drizzling water on my shoes and the floor around my feet. Some even splashed up on the pant legs of my shorts. Woo Sa Roo Moon, he muttered again, but this time it caused a chill run through me. Something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was wrong. Woo Sa Ring Run. I took a step towards the man and felt my foot slide slightly. It touched the floor. I knocked down and saw the layer of gray dust that had collected the floor. Could there be so much dust on the floor that someone lived here? Woo Song Ring Woo. I I was getting occasionally uncomfortable and felt the urge to leave, but I couldn't understand why. I glanced over to Sarah, about to speak, when I realized something I had noticed before. Maybe I missed it due to it all the clutter, but this room was in incredibly worse condition than the others. The walls were black stains on them, and the wood in the window frame was bright by seemingly started for more bottle than those of her apartments. It almost seemed like this apartment arrived as scenes of accidents, but was still some standing. So why this the only room left occupied? Wu Sha Ring Ji Ring. The broken old man shuffled past one more time. I got a quickly spray in the face. The powerful odor assisted my nostrils. The smell of the scented water was off. It was too potent, too abusive. It almost had a toxic fragrance to it. Made me want to cough, to get it out of my nose and throat. Woo, ring, ring. An itchy silver ran through me. I made a sudden realization. Guys, we need to go now, I said. I didn't wait for Sarah or David to respond. I made the door and ran. I reached my bike. Hey, what's going on? David called out as midway through the courtyard. Why did you ditch us? Sarah asked. They both got up to me with their mountain bikes, slightly out of breath. I didn't answer them. We rode the trail we ended through in silence. After only about a half hour of riding, we stumbled upon some hikers, both Swedish. They spoke impeccable English, which was good because I wasn't in the mood for talking, and Sarah was eager to get over, so over we could find our way back to the hostel. Wasn't until later that evening when we went back to the hostel. Sarah insisted that I tell them what what had me so freaked out. What's going on? Ever since we were at that creepy old guy's house, you've been acting really weird. I didn't want to tell them because I was hoping if I kept it to myself, then maybe the realization I would somehow be less real. Maybe if I didn't say it out loud, then I could believe it hadn't really happened. But it had. Remembering silence. It couldn't change that. I sighed. You know what that guy kept repeating? Yeah, you told us. It means I'm short for people. That can't be what's bothering you, though. That's not what he was saying. I heard it wrong, I replied. You see, the thing about Chinese is that the tones make all the difference. For example, if you hear G go go, it could either mean older brother or each and every, depending on what tones are using. What I thought was a meaning for people wasn't at all until I understood what he actually sprayed me with. I realized I'd been hearing the wrong tones. He wasn't sprinkling water over us apartment. He was sprinkling kerosene, and he wasn't saying I'm missing 4 people. He was saying I burned everyone. Note. The realism phrase and their Chinese translation as below. I'm missing 4 people. Wu Sang Ji Ring. I burned, literally, burn, kill everyone. Wu Sa Ying Xing.